Well, Mick, thank you very much for freeing up a bit of time.
Pleasure.
So what are your memories of, or what can you remember from, let's go back to 1972 to France. Oh, that shudder
French.
What are your memories now? Because in interviews you said, you weren't that happy with it. How do you feel now?
I didn't say I wasn't happy with it. I don't think it's gone from, I think somebody once asked me 10 years later, what's your favourite Stones album? And I said something like, Beggar's Banquet.
Yeah.
And he said, not Exile on Main Street, that's everyone's favourite. And I said, well, it's actually not my favourite. Beggar's Banquet's my favourite. And that's the sum total of my
So that's it now. For the rest of your 20 years you're doing it. Why don't you like Exile?
You have to pay for that.
Very expensively.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just said that at the time. I mean, I don't really have a favourite Stones. I mean, they're all different,
Yeah.
And I don't say this is my favourite. It seems to be sort of stupid, but people put you on the spot,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure some people have favourites, but when you do things, the thing about albums is if it's your songs and you've written them, and you do them on stage and they become songs to you. They don't become albums anymore. So, Tumbling Dice to me is a song. It's not really Exile on Main Street. It's associated with it, but to me, it's a song which goes somewhere in the, in the show. And then Sweet Virginia, sometimes I forget which even album it's from. It's just a song.
And also you've done so many as well.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't really think of these, when you've done them, you don't, because, which is an interesting thing, but because you don't do albums on stage, I know it's sort of become a fad and it's kind of, and it's got its own interest. But because you don't do Beggar's Banquet, so you don't really do it. So what you do is a song from it.
Yeah, sure.
And you're not even aware that that's from that year and one's from that year. You just do them and you may do them, in a slightly different way than you did them originally. Lots of people do over the years. These things develop a kind of live version, which is, not so acoustic or faster or slower or something. So, they don't become albums to you. It's a kind of odd thing. That people it's a rarity when people actually play a whole album. Still a rarity. Yeah.
But the making of this album is still sort of shrouded a lot of rock and roll mythology. It's one of those albums people still talk about it.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it? What was the atmosphere like?
It was terrible.
Is the answer we want?
No.
We can go. We're done now.
It was excruciating. It was a laugh. Actually, I mean, it was very familial. There was like a kind of extended family kind of thing. There was lots of kids, and there were lots of musicians. We had a horn section there all the time. We had 2 piano players, not all the time playing together, occasionally. So it was a lot of people involved, and it was in a house rather than a studio. So there tended to be a sort of 24-hour thing more or less all the time. So it was an interesting way of making a record. It was quite difficult in some ways because at the beginning I remember the technical thing of it was quite tricky because most houses aren't really equipped to plug in loads and loads and loads of amps and things. They just don't have enough power, and that was always breaking down. It was a lot of breakdowns, and then we fixed it and it was all going. But it wasn't a particularly good room to work in, so we had to really work on the room in the basement. So once we got it going, it was fine, but it took a long time to set up, which is kind of normal for the recording in a house thing.
A lot of the sort of, when people look back on that album as well, obviously there's a lot of talk over the years about Keith and his heroin problem and stuff like that. Was that as bad as we've been led to believe, or?
I don't remember how bad it really, drug taking tends to be kind of a semi-secretive for a lot of people. So you don't even really know, and it's not a sort of breakfast question. How much heroin did you take? So, did you? Oh, I only took 5 milligrams.
Pasta salt.
Yes. And your eggs?
You're making like a Terry and June sitcom.
Really know. I mean, that was a period of time when everyone took loads of drugs. It was very fashionable.
Yeah.
And, but I mean, we did a lot of hard work as well, so it was a bit of a party atmosphere, loads of visitors, and, there was a lot of drugs floating around, but not everyone was completely out of it all the time, and we did a lot of good tracks, and, You know, I mean, actually, to be perfectly sort of fair, I mean, the whole album wasn't recorded there. We recorded a lot in England.
Sure.
That's how it became, in a double album, because we recorded like an album's worth in France, in Nelcon, this house that Keith rented. We recorded like an album's worth, and then the double album came from the stuff that we had left over from the previous album, which we recorded in London at the Olympic Studios in Barnes. So it was a sort of mixture. And it all melds into one thing.
And there was some stuff done in LA as well.
There were some overdubs done in LA.
Yeah.
And we got a good album's worth of material from the French thing.
When you listen back to that album, and bizarre, it is actually my favourite. I listen to that Stones album more than the other in a way, because I like there's a real bluesy feel to it. And that's been for a lot of your stuff, but that one is really quite defined on that. But it's also got a lot of gospel stuff on there. It all feels like all of your influences and ranges are on that album.
That's what's. I mean, they think because it does have more than say 10, 11 tracks.
Yeah.
It's got a bit more room to sort of stretch out a bit. So you got to include things, let's say, that are a bit odd, like Just Want to See His Face. You might, if it had been on a 10-song album, you would say, well, it doesn't really make the grade, it's a bit of a waffle. But then after a while, you kind of get to like it, and it's got like a nice sort of one-off feel to it, and it's got, as you say, it's got a kind of gospel-y thing, and you might have just turned around and said, well, it's not really finished. But in the context of that album, it's sort of nice to have these little songs that aren't quite so, done, and so the whole thing. You're right. I mean, the interesting thing about it has so many different styles in it that are able to step out. There's a couple of country tunes and so on. So you get a bit more wider spectrum. There's a couple of blues, isn't there? There's that Robert Johnson blues song.
And how do you feel now? Suddenly in the year 2010, people are interested in it. They're talking about every day this week on the Breakfast Show. We've been playing "Plunder My Soul," which sounds brilliant.
Thank you.
Really good. And with the weather this week, it's not so nice today. It's felt like a real summery song. It's a really nice sort of, it's a great track. You must get a kick out of the fact that in the year 2010, people are still talking about this album recorded in 72.
I think it's pretty amazing, and it makes you feel really good in a way. The people still like it, and they say nice things. I had a bloke come up to me last night in a restaurant and say, that was my favourite album. I know it's not yours. I go, oh no, I'm not going to do that again. So he did say that. And he said he'd listened to the new track and he liked it. Which it's great. So. It makes you feel good that what you did has lasted all that time, and people still that weren't around then, or people that were around then, both, it doesn't really matter, still like it. So it's a pretty good feeling.
Who have you heard over the last couple of years of rock and roll bands where you're really kind of like, wow, they're doing some good stuff?
Well, I think the Kings of Leon I've watched the closest. It's like, I've sort of brought them up before, it's a bit. But I went to see them when they first came here. I went to see them live, and they had their first record. And it was kind of, it was good, but it wasn't like brilliant. But it was good. And then on stage they were a bit kind of didn't want to speak, and they, they didn't want to kind of like project.
Yeah.
And they seemed kind of like, a bit introverted for a rock band, and I thought, they're really good though, because they got all these things going on that they're obviously writing all their own songs, and they're kind of not trying to be too sort of commercial and headline grabbing with silly things. Yeah. But they're obviously musicians and quite grounded, and they've got some sense. They also got a sense of history, which is always good for people like me. They understand, and then
they've studied the classics.
They obviously learn from me. They obviously. What I wasn't trying to say was that because from where they're from and everything, they got a kind of inevitable grounding in a lot of things that are kind of interesting. And you talk about Exile and blues and country music. Well, if you come from those kind of slightly remote places, that's what you're bound to get.
Sure.
You kind of inevitably, you can't really cut yourself off, so that you can definitely hear all that coming through. And then now they've kind of gotten more popular, and I'm sure some people go, I don't like them anymore, they're rubbish and gone all commercial. But now they play arenas and they're really good, and they're much more forthcoming, and their shy moments.
I saw the Twickenham gig, and it was a fantastic gig. But the energy, when you talk about bands projecting, that live performance is a proper live performance for you, very much so, but for the rest of the band as well. You still must get a kick out of the live stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the most exciting part of it. I mean, people talk about, what it's like in the studio. It's very, as far as this album's concerned, they compared the thing of it. And when we were making this, documentary about Exile, and, when I saw one cut of the film, and I said to the director, Stephen Kijak, and I said, the thing is, I was trying to get him to understand what a buzz it was to actually finish the album and get onto the stage to play the songs. You know what I mean?
That's where the fun is.
Yeah, that's the next stage of it. And I said, we've got like trying to get that across. How exciting! It's not just an album and you've now finished it and you just like put your guitars in a case. Now, those songs you're going to now go straight into rehearsal and do them, and then you find out if they're any good or not. To be honest, because in a studio you can make things sound really good in a studio, but are they going to work when you play them live? Because you don't have all the tricks, and you don't have this, and you don't have that, and maybe you don't have the harmonies, and and is it going to work as a kind of is the audience going to like the song, basically?
And get into it.
And so that's the kind of the playing live is obviously a buzz for everybody, but when you're doing a record and you got your first 2-3 songs from it, you can like, is this going to work? And is it, because they tend to go a bit flat when you first play them. People kind of like got their mouths open and go, what's that? And, oh yeah, that's been their new record. Oh no, how many of these are going to play? And after you have to keep playing and keep playing. And then eventually, they go, yeah, it's great, we like it now. So you can't be discouraged, but that is the buzz of part of the buzz of live playing.
How did it start then? For you being a frontman, mate, you're incredibly unique frontman, like all the best ones are. Your kind of style, which is very frenetic, very energetic, that kind of started from the first gig you ever did on a stage, surely?
No, but I mean, it wasn't. I mean, I done. Yeah, I remember when I was 15, I was like pretty frenetic, but I mean, I always watched people who you get your ideas from other people,
sure.
Who you're going to copy. So I always watched people that were like good performers, whatever they were, like Chuck Berry or Little Richard, or even more sort of homegrown. What was he called? Johnny Kidd and the Pirates. I don't know, going back a bit.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Cliff Richard then.
I didn't say that. No, but Johnny Kidd and the Pirates. His thing we used to do in his tiny stage used to come on with an eye patch and everything, and he had a great big knife, and he took the knife out of his belt and threw it into the stage, and it quivered like that, and I was like, oh, okay. That's not a bad little opening,
You should use it.
Johnny would kill me for that.
Yeah.
Johnny would kill me with that knife. No, but what I'm saying is, it's not just mouthing the words of the song. It's expecting everyone to like it. You've got to go a bit further, and you have to. The thing is that frenetic is all very well, but you have to connect with the audience.
Yeah.
You have to do. And when we're talking about the Kings of Leon at the beginning, they didn't really do that successfully. But they, everyone has to do it in the end, because otherwise it becomes kind of embarrassing being in the room if you're not really connecting.
Well, Oasis are brilliant live, but sometimes I feel awkward after about half an hour because they don't move. But that's part of
that's what they do. They don't move. I mean, that doesn't mean to say they don't connect.
Yeah.
I mean, they do connect sometimes. Sometimes in not always good ways.
Yeah.
What was that famous story when they were in New York and they didn't think the New York audience was loud enough, and that's something like, "You're rubbish" or something. New York, you're a load of crap, or something like that. Which is not what you do anywhere, really, especially New York. But I don't know if that's just apocryphal or this is a real story.
And are you going to do some more live stuff? There's everyone wants to know.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah,
and look forward to doing it. Yeah, absolutely.